If you like what I do, consider joining my channel or donating to my coffee. Links in the description. Welcome to part 2 of Turkeyvania 2025, where I'm taking a look at every game on my tier list and just talking about them. What the game is, what makes it unique, what's a criticism I have on it. Nothing huge, just something for you to listen to as you travel. And yes, I changed the name to Turkeyvania because everyone in the comments kept saying it and I liked it, so I stole it. And yes, it's not Thanksgiving anymore, but the name shall persist. And no, I won't be doing any more intros for the rest of the series. I'm only doing this one because I wanted to show you this. Check it out. My tier list is unintentionally a near perfect bell curve. Does that add legitimacy to my list? I don't know, but I thought it was cool nonetheless. Anyway, on to part 2 of Turkeyvania, the B tier, part 1.
The B tier, part 1.
Microvania. Man, I got nothing to set this game up. You're a person in power armor exploring a world. It looks like you're given a mission, and when you beat the game, it looks like you accomplished that mission. What the mission is, I have no idea, but you accomplished it, so good work. Microvania is a game named after a subgenre of a subgenre, and it does the name proud because Microvania is an exemplary Microvania. It takes its Metroid inspiration and condenses it down to a 2-hour or less adventure. And if that wasn't impressive enough, Microvania is also a non-linear experience that's a blast to play and replay. As far as unique elements, Microvania really doesn't try to reinvent the wheel. It wants to give you a short, non-linear adventure, and by gum, it nails it. With all the collectibles, upgrades, and shortcuts to find, it's tough not to have fun in the short time you're in Microvania's world. As far as criticism goes, there's a feature where you press a button to remain stationary so you can aim more accurately, but instead of remaining stationary, you slide, which is hilarious but rarely helpful. That's my only criticism unless that got patched since I last played. If that's the case, no notes. Tiny Dangerous Dungeons Remake. You're a treasure hunter searching in a tiny dangerous dungeon for treasure. Can you get the treasure and escape unscathed? Dungeons is a remake with a new coat of paint, upgrading the game from the Game Boy to the Game Boy Advance, visually. It's a short and sweet MV that gives you everything you need in a Microvania, not to be confused with the entry for the game Microvania. It has decent combat with bosses that require brains and brawn, it has platforming sections that are fun and challenging, and it even has a ton of secrets and a true ending. For a game that's like 2 hours long, it certainly packs a punch. There's really nothing new or unique Dungeons does. It just takes the MV experience and distills it down to its purest form so you can get a quick fix. It's actually impressive how well the game nails the MV formula in such a short time. I guess you could say that's what makes it unique. I honestly have no criticism for Dungeons. It knows what it wants to be and becomes it. No notes. Ufouria, the Saga. I'm going to use the Western names and story because I'm from the West, but just know I'm fully aware of the Reverie series. Anyway, Bapa Louie and his friends fall into a crater and lose their memories. Now, you must gather your friends if you stand any chance of getting out of this crater. Ufouria is a classic MV from the NES era that stands the test of time. Exploration is super fun, and the graphics are pretty dang good. It's a little on the short side, maybe 2 to 3 hours long, but it's such a dense 2 to 3 hours that you'll think you finished it quicker. Ufouria is the first MV to have swappable characters. Yes, I know Wonder Boy 3 The Dragon's Trap has swappable characters, but you couldn't swap them on the fly unless you picked up a really rare item. So, for all intents and purposes, Ufouria is the first MV with swappable characters as an advertised and unhidden mechanic. As far as criticism goes, you know I hate criticizing games that helped forge the genre, but I'd have to say pausing to swap characters sucks. It just messes with the game's flow. And dying sucks. Every time you die, you get sent back to the very beginning of the game. You keep your progress, but you still have to endure the run back, and dying doesn't give back all your HP either, which is kinda dumb. Moonlight Pulse. You are aliens living inside of a giant space turtle in space, and it's your job to keep this guy healthy. Things are going pretty well until a cosmic, space-tearing alien decides to make your home its next meal. Now, it's up to you and your organization to repel this jerk for the sake of the giant space turtle and all the creatures living within. Moonlight Pulse is a cute little MV with a surprisingly interesting story and fun characters. It has an adorable pixel art style and a fascinating world where you live inside of a space turtle, and for being such a short game, running you between 4 and 5 hours, it's a pretty well realized MV. As far as unique elements, Moonlight Pulse has quite a few. First and foremost, the swapping mechanic. Being able to play as multiple characters isn't new for the genre. Heck, I just got done talking about Ufouria the Saga, but the rescue mechanic is. If you take a fatal hit, another character will push you out of the way. It's really cool and reinforces the whole power of friendship will overcome evil trope that I love and will always love. Fast travel is pretty unique here too. It's literally an artery you can jump in like it's a lazy river ride. You ride it till you hit a fork, then you can choose your direction and ultimately where you want to get off. It can be a little time consuming, but it's still really cool and a great way to show progress as you unclog the artery to reveal new paths and exits. This next bit is a little spoilery, so skip to the next game if you don't want to be spoiled. Another really cool thing Moonlight Pulse does is the turtle meter, for lack of a better term. While progressing, you can do things that increases your turtle meter, up to 100%. You don't really know what this meter is for until you fight the boss of the game. Turns out, this meter is the turtle's life bar, and the final boss attacks it directly. Therefore, the final boss fight has a time limit that you've been unknowingly increasing throughout the game, given you were actually doing the side content that increased the turtle's life. That's a really cool revelation. My biggest criticism is that I wish the game was longer. 4 to 5 hours isn't awful, but having more content would definitely have been a great thing. Still worth playing though. Ultros. Oh boy, where do I even start? You are trapped in a cosmic time loop aboard a massive alien sarcophagus housing a demon with the capability to destroy reality itself. Each loop unveils more secrets surrounding the spacecraft and what happened to it, and it's up to you to make sense of everything if you want to escape this never-ending cycle. To put it simply, Ultros may be the most clever Metroidvania ever created. Yet, despite this, or because of this, it will not appeal to everyone. I can certainly say it doesn't really appeal to me, but I honestly respect the heck out of it. It's one of those games where most of its design choices are baffling at first, but then make complete sense and are borderline genius once you come to understand what the game is doing. I'm about to get spoilery, so if you want to not be spoiled, skip to the next game now. So, this is the section where I talk about the unique stuff in the game, and so we're going to dive into those strange design choices. First, the looping mechanic. Every time you find a new sage, the game loops. You lose all your progress, and you have to restart the game. That includes finding your sword and all your traversal abilities over again, as well as leveling up your character's skill tree. The only thing that remains is your map progress. This sounds like a pain in the butt, but I promise you the game makes getting back all your things a breeze as the cycles continue. And that's thanks to the game's gardening system. Because not only does your map progress retain between cycles, but any seeds you sowed will grow into plants during the next cycle, and you can use these plants to reach new areas, like vines for swinging and tall trees you can climb. It's pretty freaking cool. Another design choice you may not really like at first is its combat. It's just kind of bland with very little bells and whistles, and the boss fights really aren't that great. Well, that's because you're not supposed to fight them. You can actually find ways to get around boss fights by doing things that helps them understand the situation better or whatever. It's fascinating and a lot of fun to figure out. Don't like relearning all your moves in the skill tree? You can find items to retain your knowledge between cycles, which in turn makes the game's nutrition system pointless, which in turn makes the game's fighting system that rewards you with better food if you diversify your moves while fighting. Moreover, hunting for food becomes pointless because all the plants you've grown start producing fruit, making fighting anything a complete waste of time. It's so incredible how so many systems get undermined as you progress in the game, getting replaced by other non-violent systems. It's so clever and reinforces the game's messaging and themes so beautifully. It actually makes me mad by how good it is. And watching yourself transform from a vicious hunter to a pacifist who's one with nature is such a stark revelation, you can't help but be awed by its brilliance. And I've yet to talk about the genius that is this game's path to the true ending, reconnecting the living network. Talk about a complete tonal and mechanical shift. First, the game was a traditional MV with a combat focus, then it becomes a puzzle platformer the likes I've never seen. Essentially, to get the game's true ending, you have to connect every sage in the game with the monster at the center of the ship. And this is no small task. Matter of fact, I'm pretty sure this endeavor doubles your playtime. It is that involved. You literally have to run around the entire map and ensure that this cord connects to all these points. And this is going to involve you planting seeds and restarting cycles so you can use the newly grown plants as connection points to get the cord to reach further into the ship. I'm telling you, the devs behind Ultros have outdone themselves with this, and they have all my respect. As for criticisms, I have no notes. This game is brilliant, and any perceived flaws are intentional and are set so they can be undermined later in order to reinforce the game's messaging. Violence isn't the answer, connecting with others is. It's an old message, but universal themes work after all these years for a reason. I'm sorry to get all pretentious on you, but Ultros is a game with a message that permeates throughout its every mechanic. My only real criticism is the game's art. It's not my favorite, but it's definitely not bad. And honestly, the game's going for an alien aesthetic, and to that end, I think this art direction fits the bill. Primal Planet. You're a caveman with a cave family. Aliens arrive and take your cave wife and cave kid, and now you must use your particular set of cave skills to get them back. Primal Planet is a whole lot of fun, thanks in large part to its setting. The environments are beautiful, and each environment has its own ecosystem where herbivores will leave you alone and carnivores will eat whatever gets in your way. Primal Planet is a survival Metroidvania, which I think is pretty unique in the space. If you want to survive, you'll have to gather materials, craft, and work with your caveman villagers. My biggest criticism for Primal Planet was how abruptly the ending was, but that's been fixed in a recent update, so I have to check that out. My other criticism is how much swimming is in the game. Maybe like a quarter of the game is spent underwater, and that's just crazy to me. But the dev added dolphins you can ride in a post-launch update, so that may mitigate much of my swimming woes. Lone Fungus. Greencap awakens in a long-dead underground kingdom and is immediately thrust into an adventure where he must collect the DNA of 10 fallen tribes in order to resurrect them. Lone Fungus takes some inspiration from Hollow Knight when it comes to its setting and all the pogoing and the relic system, but that's pretty much where the inspiration stops. While Hollow Knight is more combat-focused, Lone Fungus is all about platforming, though its combat is pretty fun and absurdly robust with the 20+ spell variations you can pull off. Lone Fungus's precise platforming challenges is the game's main claim to fame, so if you want to take on some ridiculously tough and absurdly fast platforming, Lone Fungus has your back. My main criticism with Lone Fungus is its fast travel. It's pretty limited, and improving it requires you to do a bunch of optional and hidden stuff. I much prefer it when games have fast travel be good out the gate. Oolo. The world flame is on the cusp of going out, and it's up to you to rekindle it. Thus, you set sail to the Isle of Souls, where many puzzles and tribulations await. Oolo is a non-combat MV that takes a lot of inspiration from Solstice, which means we have ourselves an isometric Metroidvania, but this time with voxel graphics. I think this game looks great, and I love its soundtrack too. It's full of clever puzzles, and there's an optional in-game scavenger hunt if you're looking to see the best ending. For uniqueness, Oolo being an isometric MV that doesn't focus on combat is pretty unique in and of itself. But the scavenger hunt and all the puzzles are a pretty good reason to check this one out too. My only criticism for Oolo is that puzzles don't stay solved, and this can make backtracking pretty tedious. Moonscars. Grey Irma, a Clayborn warrior, awakens beneath a pale moon, driven to uncover her origins. She must find the sculptor if she's to figure out what happened to her team and this world. Moonscars is a very cool, combat-focused Metroidvania with a very unique art style and a gothic narrative that's as dark as its visuals. I'm not a parry guy, but I really enjoyed the parry in this game. I'm not sure if it had a generous parry window or not, but if I was pulling parries off like a master, then the window was probably very generous. When it comes to uniqueness, the art direction is the most obvious. With only blacks and grays and pops of red, this game is an absolute feast for the eyes. Moonscars also has a sort of roguelike feature in that death is part of progression, and respawning typically means you're gonna get a new special move with different character buffs. It's honestly just an oddity at this point and has very little bearing on gameplay, but I guess it was much more integrated into the experience at launch. Something else more integrated at launch was Moonhunger, a mechanic that made enemies tougher when you died, but you could lower the difficulty to normal by using an item called a gland. Moonhunger was much more frequent at launch for a couple reasons. Every time you reached a save point, you would die, activating Moonhunger and forcing you to fight a clone of yourself. And Moonhunger would activate every time you died. When I played Moonscars, Moonhunger didn't activate every time I died, and I appreciated that. My criticism for Moonscars is its story. Its premise is intriguing, but its delivery leaves certain plot points vague or confusing, and I would have liked to have seen more world building and character depth. I also thought some of the side quests were too unrewarding. This could be boiled down to me having too high of expectations, but I wanted more from certain side quests that seemed important. But instead of getting something like an alternative toward a true ending, you get more glands. Very disappointing. Cookie Cutter. You are Cherry, an android, or Denzel, hell-bent on rescuing her lover from the bratty Nepo baby billionaire who kidnapped her. Why he kidnapped her, you don't know. All you know is you're gonna kill him and anyone who gets in your way. Cookie Cutter is a brutal and irreverent Metroidvania with over-the-top combat that has Battletoad-esque flourishes. The game's a brawler through and through and loves to lock you in battle arenas and curse. Cookie Cutter's uniqueness comes in many flavors. First, its art style. Whether you dig Cherry's style or not, you can't say she isn't memorable. The art and animations are very clean and expressive and remind me a lot of Doug Tenapel's work from Earthworm Jim. There's also a ton of Easter eggs in the game that reference other video games, music, movies, and so much more. It's a lot of fun just finding stuff while exploring, especially if you grew up in the 90s and 2000s. Its combat is interesting thanks to what I have dubbed Void Management. Void is your mana, and you build it up with regular attacks. Your regular attacks are extremely weak and are almost exclusively there to build up your Void. Void is then used for your special moves or your heavy attacks, both of which do way more damage than your light attacks. So this makes for an interesting synergy in combat. You run in with light attacks in order to build up Void for your chainsaw. It's a whole lot of fun once you get used to it. It makes combat feel more purposeful despite it looking chaotic. The light attacks are just there so you can get the energy needed for the big attacks, and if you miss with the big attacks, you gotta go back to flailing away with the light attacks so you can try again. Also, the game has a talking vagina. I can't think of a single game, MV or otherwise, that has a talking vagina. When it comes to criticism, I'm looking at the narrative's pacing. Cookie Cutter's world is so rich and ripe with interesting and goofy characters, but there's just so much wasted potential here, likely due to time constraints. The most interesting part of the game, when you get to the Rebels town, is introduced way too late. I would have loved interacting with all these weirdos way earlier in the game. This should have been the hub town in my opinion, and all these characters should have been integrated into the story much more. And that brings me to my other criticism, the cliffhanger ending. Like I said, much of the most interesting things in Cookie Cutter come very late in the game, so right when the game's getting really good, it comes to an end with a ridiculous cliffhanger that has a couple of insane twists. I'd like to think we'll be getting DLC or a sequel to continue where the team left off. I'll keep my fingers crossed as the team is going through some stuff right now. The Devil Within, Satgat. An enormous spiked tower of mysterious origin suddenly appears in the land of Joseon, oozing with pure white oil that revitalizes the dying land. Humanity tries to harness the power of this mysterious liquid, and then, oops, a portal to hell opens and demons start ravaging the land. Kim Rip tries to take out this tower, but he gets betrayed during his mission and only survives by getting possessed by a demon. Now, he and the demon must work together to stop this madness. Satgat is a very linear Metroidvania where backtracking is meant to unlock and find optional stuff, and levels aren't interconnected. It's a tough game that I found fair, and I really enjoyed its combat. Satgat is kinda Soulsy, but not really. It sorta has stamina management with something akin to it called action points. You have so many action points, and once they're used up, you become exhausted and must wait for your points to recover. But regular attacks don't expend action points, only special moves and dodges do. So if you want to hack away with regular attacks, you can. As far as uniqueness goes, I really liked Satgat's progression system. There are 3 colored stat points, and you get different colored points as you level. For instance, I level up and get a red point, then I level up again and I get a blue and yellow point. I can then use these points on colored skills. It's not revolutionary, but it restricts how fast you grow in an organic way. The game's parry system is pretty cool too. Once you nail a perfect parry, the game slows down and you can choose a counter, with each counter bringing different advantages for different scenarios. When it comes to criticism, I just felt Satgat was kinda bland. Don't get me wrong, I liked it, but it does very little to stand out from the Soulsvania crowd. The MV exploration was just okay. Obviously, that didn't make it a completely unenjoyable experience, but it's something worth considering. I also found the penultimate boss to be way more challenging than the rest of the game. He exclusively requires you to parry him to do any real damage, and I just suck at parrying. Tevi. I'm not gonna lie, I don't remember what happens in Tevi, or what the inciting event even is. Tevi's tasked with gathering astral gears for her dad, I think, but I can't remember why. Research, I guess. But in the what, I can't remember. But basically a bunch of hijinks and uncovering of corruption ensues as you collect these gears. If you liked Reverie, then you'll like Tevi. Tevi is a pretty large Metroidvania known for its bullet hell boss fights and insane amount of badges, abilities, and builds. It's a pretty little game with excellent pixel work, a chibi style, and anime-esque portraits and character tropes. Tevi's uniqueness comes in the form of its badge system, or whatever it's called. It's very similar to Revie's badge system, but Tevi cranks it all the way up to 11 with the amount of badges and customization. The bullet hell bosses are highlights too, but those are also from Reverie. My criticism for Tevi is its narrative. First off, there is no other MV that talks more than Tevi. Maybe Reverie, but I think Tevi takes the cake here. There's just so much yapping in this game, and for what? The story is very much trash, and this is coming from a Tevi fan. There's Deus Ex Machinas, dropped plot points, forgotten character arcs, and a twist we've all seen soap operas use for over 20 years. For so much yapping, this game literally has nothing to say. It's downright impressive, actually. The closest Tevi gets to a coherent message is racism bad, but they don't explore it or flesh it out. It's just kind of implied. There's also a ridiculous amount of buffs and debuffs. During any given boss fight, the side of your screen will be full of text telling you all the debuffs you have, so you can pause the game and studiously peruse each line item to fully comprehend the predicament you're in, or you can ignore it and just play video games. I chose the latter and turned out just fine. Lost Epic. In a world where gods wage war against humanity, a knight rises to challenge divine tyranny. What's funny about Lost Epic is that I picked it up because I was looking to take a break from Metroidvanias, and just my luck, it ended up being a Metroidvania. And a pretty darn good one at that. It's not perfect and has that knockoff Vanillaware look, but it's actually pretty good despite its repetitiveness. The game's weird in that it's both linear and non-linear, and it accomplishes this by having biomes open to you, but you have to go through every biome in a certain order to reach the other biomes. It's silly, but it works. The game also allows you to create builds with different weapons. It's surprisingly robust for a cheap-looking game. Lost Epic's uniqueness comes in its progression system and with a very interesting ability that will require me to spoil the late game, so I'll say something prior to spoiling it. For its progression, you can get skill points to level up what you want, but you can also find monuments scattered throughout the world, typically hidden in pocket dimensions that house tricky combat and platforming sections. Each monument unlocks something in your, I guess I'll call it, progression book. I also like this interesting system they have for the bosses. It's been a minute since I've played the game, but basically you have to build up faith or something around those lines, And to build up faith, you have to do side quests in the biome where the god presides. Once you have enough faith, you can fight the boss normally, but if you don't gather enough faith, the boss gets a significant buff. So doing the side quests to earn people's faith to make the bosses easier is a cool idea. Okay, spoiler time. Skip to the next game if you don't want to hear this. So, something else I really liked about Lost Epic was this move you get near the end of the game called the Eye of Providence. You activate this eye and the world goes sepia-toned and you can see things that were once invisible to you. This was so cool because now you realize that all these odd little flowers you were seeing along your journey are now signposts to invisible paths and platforms. So now, you have to scour the entire map looking for these flowers so you can collect god residue or whatever it's called, and once you have enough of that, you can complete the game with the true ending. It's a pretty outstanding way to cap off the adventure. Also, I forgot to mention that the game has an interesting way to adjust difficulty. There's essentially a totem or monument or something like that in each biome, and this thing lets you adjust the difficulty for that biome. It's kinda neat. As for my criticisms for Lost Epic, I'm gonna go with its false build diversity, which brings up another criticism: insane difficulty spikes. Near the end of the game, there's this boss that ramps the difficulty up to an absurd degree, so much so that I just had to turn the difficulty down in order to defeat him. Now, I didn't want to turn the difficulty down, I wanted to beat him legit. So I got online and watched some vids of people taking this guy out, and wouldn't you know it, every video and guide that I saw was like, you need a bow build. And, of course, I had made a great sword build because I'm a man and that's what men do. So I had to take the difficulty down because I was not going to grind so I could shoot a dainty little bow. Then I get to the next boss and hit another wall. I look up strategies and guess what? Bow build. Turns out the bow build is literally the only build worth a crap in Lost Epic, and I hate that. Not because it's a bow, but because why even have the other builds if they aren't viable in the late game? I hate it when games do this so much. Shadow Labyrinth. You are Swordman number 8, a boy whose soul has been spirited away into another dimension by a mysterious AI named Puck. Now, you're forced to help Puck escape this prison if you ever want to see your home again. Shadow Labyrinth is a big game with lots of ground to cover. It's kind of a Souls-like in that combat has stamina management, but the character you play as is so quick and responsive, I can't rightfully call it a Souls-like, especially because there's no traditional leveling or stats or builds. What the game does have is decent exploration for people who love getting lost in MVs. In terms of uniqueness, this is a Metroidvania with Pac-Man in it. That's pretty cool in and of itself. The game has you become the dot muncher when you use these rails to get around, and the game actually brings mazes from the Pac-Man series for you to complete. As for my criticisms, there are so many. The controls for Pac-Man when he's on the rails suck, and this in turn means the mazes suck because they require you to use these terrible controls while on a time limit. Another issue is that proper checkpoints are too infrequent. There are two kinds of checkpoints in this game, big and small. Both respawn you, but only the big ones refill your Estus flask, so if you're out of heals when you touch a small checkpoint, you're screwed. I also think this game is just way too big. You'll hear me say this exact thing when I talk about Aeterna Noctis, but sometimes less is more. If Shadow Labyrinth were to cut its biomes in half, the game would be better for it. Having enormous maps only works if you have the intrigue and story to back it up, and Shadow Labyrinth does not have that interesting of a story to warrant a 30-hour adventure. GIGASWORD. A homeless man named Ezra lives in a world where humans suffer at the hands of the Nocturne, owl-like beings who hoard away the one thing that could save humanity: Gnosis, the God Crystal. As humans rage war against the Nocturne, Ezra's owl friend is slain, sending the man into a vengeful rage. He picks up his friend's giant blade and rushes the invading army. GIGASWORD is probably the best puzzle platforming MV on the market, at least gameplay-wise. I love Iconoclasts because it has such an amazing story, but GIGASWORD brings excellent combat, platforming, and puzzles. The puzzles in GIGASWORD won't tax your brain too hard, but they will require you to think and figure out how to use the game's many mechanics. And attacking things with your GIGASWORD feels amazing. The thing has some real heft and just feels great to lug around and smack things with. When it comes to GIGASWORD's uniqueness, I want to give a shout out to the game's music. I loved every single track in this game. In my review, I said I couldn't put my finger on the game's sound font, and a couple people said it was Shovel Knight, and I can totally hear it now. But the big thing, literally, that sets GIGASWORD apart is the titular GIGASWORD. It's a weapon as much as it is a puzzle element, and having the player balance between wielding the GIGASWORD and not wielding the GIGASWORD in order to progress is a lot of fun. The criticisms I have for GIGASWORD are its narrative and lack of fast travel. The plot's fine and creative, but its delivery is a bit of a mess. The game leans hard into melodrama and tends to talk a lot at certain points, and world building is regulated to exposition dump scrolls that require a lot of reading. And the lack of fast travel is a real bummer, especially for folks who want 100% the game. Vernal Edge. In a kingdom of floating islands caused by a catastrophe, a fiery young warrior named Vernal seeks vengeance against her estranged father. Vernal Edge is a pretty good MV that doesn't mind throwing you into the deep end at the very beginning. You have like 3 or 4 different biomes to search, and the game doesn't tell you where to go or even what your short-term objective is. I actually liked that about the game and thought it worked because the game's so combat-oriented. Vernal Edge will have you fighting and juggling enemies pretty much the entire runtime, and it gives you so many moves to take enemies down. It's like Devil May Cry mixed with Smash Brothers. And the main character, Vernal, might be the fastest and most agile MV Pro Tag to date. Not only is her default speed very quick, she gets all kinds of insane moves to get around, like sliding down inclines, an interesting kick out of her jumps to gain even more height in any direction, and temporary flight. Vernal's moveset is surprisingly diverse. Vernal Edge's unique element, besides its great combat and incredible traversal moveset, is its PS1 era transitions between floating islands. It's excellent for world building and rewards players who find hidden little islands and alcoves. I also like the game's healing mechanic. You basically throw your sword at an enemy and then press a direction and attack to follow up with an attack that drains HP. It's a great way to keep the action frantic. My biggest criticisms for Vernal Edge are its narrative and difficulty spike. The narrative, because so many beats feel too convenient and contrived, like assembling the MacGuffin in the beginning so you could find a certain place. The biomes you explore just so happen to have the exact things you need to make this thing, even though you didn't know you needed to make the thing in the first place. Kinda weak. And the difficulty spike, it's pretty late in the game, but you hit this boss that forces you to use the game's parry system, which is fine, but every boss from that point on requires you to parry. If you don't parry a boss's attack, you will not get any openings to do damage. It's not terrible, but parrying was optional up to this point. To make it a requirement to finish the game felt a little weird. Alwa's Legacy. I don't know how to set this game up. It picks up from Alwa's Awakening, and it sees Alwa still trying to escape this fantasy land or whatever. I'm sorry for the dismissive synopsis. I actually like Alwa's Legacy. It's just tough to set it up because it's the exact same setup as the first game. Anyway, the coolest thing about Alwa's Legacy is that it's a puzzle platformer, but still manages to be non-linear, which I think is an impressive feat. The game has a lot of clever dungeon designs and a neat pacifist mode. What makes Alwa's Legacy stand out is the progression system for your spells. You collect orbs and then can allocate those orbs into your spells to unlock new abilities, and these abilities can help with traversal and unlocking new areas. So, if you need a certain upgrade to reach somewhere, you can take orbs from a spell and put them into another spell to get the move you need. It's kinda cool. My biggest criticism for Alwa's Legacy is its story. It had so much potential and then just falls flat on its face. It picks up where the last game left off, basically showing that Alwa has moved to another dimension or something, and this is shown by having the game jump from 8-bit to 16-bit. But the game doesn't do anything with its shift and revelation. It literally rehashes the first game's story and ends things terribly. It could be a me thing because I had high expectations for the narrative, like it was actually going to do something interesting, and then it decided not to do that. Rebel Transmute. Explore the twisting caverns of an alien planet to uncover a dark truth as Moon Makono searches for her long-lost mother. Rebel Transmute is an excellent Metroidvania for Metroidvania fans. It's full of Easter eggs, hidden techniques, and sequence-breaking moments. Its NES aesthetic pulls a lot of weight in creating a nostalgic feel, and the fact that the game's also NES hard compounds that nostalgia for old heads like me. Rebel Transmute's most unique element is just how hard it goes to create a Metroidvania that will surprise even the most hardcore Metroidvania fan. There are so many areas that can't even be accessed unless you discover the game's hidden techs. The game really wants you to think outside the box with all its abilities and modifications. For my criticism, the game was pretty buggy at launch, but I'd wager those bugs have been fixed by now. I will say the game really dropped the ball on intrigue. Many of the most fascinating things that have been teasing you the entire game end up having no real payoff, which is a huge bummer. You'd think that some of these extracurriculars would lead to something interesting, the minimum expectation being a path to a true ending. But no, just fighting secret bosses for secret bosses' sake. Very disappointing. Aeterna Noctis. In the beginning, the supreme god Chaos created the universe and the world of Aeterna, and populated it with different races and creatures. Soon, his creations turned against him, seeking to take the world for themselves. Chaos was angered, and in his terrible wrath, cursed the rebellious leaders. He named them the King of Darkness and the Queen of Light, and condemned them to fight each other forever, until the end of time. Aeterna Noctis follows the King of Darkness as he tries to find a way to break this vicious cycle. Aeterna Noctis is one of the most difficult MVs out there, bar none. Not only is its combat tough, but its platforming is insane. So insane that the devs patched in an easier mode post-launch. So if you want an epic MV that's going to push you to your limit, Aeterna Noctis is your game. When it comes to uniqueness, the extreme difficulty might be what takes the cake here. That and the game's teleporting arrows. Those are pretty sweet. My biggest criticism is that the game is way too long. I've said in the past that every biome in this game could be cut in half and the game would be better for it, and I stick by that statement. Not everyone agrees with me, of course, but with a game this difficult with such precise platforming, I'd get tired if any play session lasted over 2 hours, so going 20 plus hours to complete the game was exhausting. And the idle animation the King of Darkness does is goofy. He kinda wobbles a bit when you stop moving. It made sense in the beginning of the game because he had literally just slammed into the ground from orbit, but you'd think by mid-game he would have gotten his bearings. Axiom Verge. A scientist awakens in a strange alien world after a failed experiment. Exploring its labyrinths, he uncovers secrets of ancient technology, identity, and the fragile line between reality and illusion. Ori and the Blind Forest stunned the gaming industry with its MV greatness, and Axiom Verge came in with the knockout. The 1-2 combo these games gave the industry back in 2015 revitalized the Metroidvania genre, though it was a pity they were initially segregated into different ecosystems. Ori for Xbox and Axiom Verge for PlayStation. Axiom Verge impressed by being a faithful homage to the Metroid series, completely dropping the Vania part of Metroidvania by ditching the RPG elements and focusing more on upgrading through exploration. This showed that the original formula that laid down the genre's foundation was not only viable, but preferred by many genre fans. More impressive is that Axiom Verge was developed by a single guy named Thomas Happ. It's incredible that one man created a game with such a fascinating story that still enthralls gamers to this day. Axiom Verge's most unique element is its narrative. It's thought-provoking, compelling, and mysterious, still hooking gamers a decade after launch. The Axiom Disruptor is pretty huge too. It's a gun that essentially glitches the game. Shooting enemies will change their appearance and behavior, and you can alter the environment with it too. It's very intriguing and is a whole lot of fun to experiment with, reinforcing the narrative and creating a game world that's hard to pin down. Is this world real? A simulation? A video game? Or something else? The passcode tool doesn't help out matters, as you can put in codes to alter the game in many ways. From changing costumes to unlocking the debug mode to opening doors that couldn't be opened any other way. Axiom Verge really is a trip. It's tough to criticize Axiom Verge because it does so many things well. I guess I wish there weren't so many guns in the game. That's a weird criticism, but there really isn't a need for so many guns. Maybe having something else to collect that would have expanded on the game's world and lore would have been preferred. Momodora, Moonlit Farewell. Join Momo, High Priestess of the village of Koho, as she embarks on a divine mission to save her people from imminent destruction at the hands of the demon hordes summoned by a malevolent bellringer. Moonlit Farewell is a comfort MV for me. Its atmosphere, environments, music, and pixel work just make me feel good, for lack of a better term. The game's overall presentation is exactly what I love. Detailed sprites, outstanding animation, and a cute/spooky aesthetic. And the game isn't exactly the easiest. Enemies hit pretty hard for some reason, and though Moonlit Farewell is the longest game in the series, it's still a pretty succinct experience at around 8 to 10 hours, my personal MV sweet spot. Moonlit Farewell's aesthetics is its biggest claim to fame. If you love pixel graphics and adorable sprites with excellent animations, you're gonna love what Moonlit Farewell brings to the table. My biggest criticisms for Moonlit Farewell aren't that serious. It no longer has the no-hit boss awards, and the game has weird difficulty spikes because enemy damage is nuts, but these things really don't bother me. People have brought up how the game doesn't innovate within the genre, which is true, but not every game can be the next big thing. And I've heard people disappointed in the game's small scope. But not every MV needs to be a sprawling epic. Sometimes it's nice to play something with smaller stakes in a tinier world. Sometimes I want a quick in and out MV. I was more than content with Moonlit Farewell's experience. Ori and the Blind Forest. In a forest dying from a catastrophe, a small guardian spirit named Ori must embark on a journey to heal the spirit tree. The MV genre owes so much to Ori and the Blind Forest. It is my most humble of humble opinions that Blind Forest, along with Axiom Verge, reinvigorated the genre and brought MVs mainstream. One could argue Shadow Complex had a hand in resurrecting the genre, and it certainly served as a reminder that Metroidvanias were still fun, but Blind Forest was just something else. It showed that MVs could be excellent vehicles for emotionally resonant storytelling, and that platforming is an integral part of the MV experience. Up until Ori, platforming played second fiddle to combat in MVs. Of course, Metroidvanias always had platforming at various degrees of challenge and attention, but Ori showed how much more fun and engaging an MV could be when platforming took the spotlight. And of course, its visual splendor wasn't just decoration. It was proof that Metroidvanias could stand shoulder to shoulder with the most celebrated works of modern gaming. For Blind Forest, its most unique element besides its heavy emphasis on platforming was its save system. You could literally save anywhere as long as you remembered to use the save ability, which complemented the game's more challenging platforming sections. Simply save before attempting anything, and you never had to worry about runbacks. And of course, Ori's gorgeous visuals and excellent storytelling should get a mention here too. My biggest criticism for Blind Forest is its combat. As much as I loved the emphasis on platforming, I didn't appreciate the decreased emphasis on combat. Ori has a flying companion who shoots lightning at foes, and it just doesn't feel great. And there are 0 bosses in the game, instead being replaced with chase sequences. Chase sequences are fine, but did we really need 4 or 5 of them? And many of these sequences felt trial and error-y, which could lead to multiple retries and frustration. But overall, I feel the chases were well designed for the most part. Metroid Dread. Our girl Samus returns and must travel to the mysterious planet ZDR after the Galactic Federation loses contact with its Emmy robots sent to investigate reports of the deadly X-Parasite. Once there, she's ambushed, stripped of her abilities, and must survive against relentless Emmy hunters while uncovering the secrets of the planet and the fate of the X-Parasite. Dread is probably my favorite Metroid game. Samus has never felt so good to play as, and the 360-degree shooting is so much fun. I'm also a huge fan of this game's parry, and of course, the presentation is incredible. Dread also comes with a nice injection of difficulty I think the series needed. There were many boss fights that gave me a run for my money, especially the final boss. I think it took me a dozen tries to take that dude out, and I actually enjoyed the Emmy sections. They became too formulaic in the end, but I didn't think they were bad. When it comes to unique elements, Dread brought a few nifty new tricks to the franchise, like an air dash, but I'd say the Emmy sections are Dread's most distinctive and divisive feature. My criticism for Dread is the same as it is for every Metroid. exploration loses its luster and becomes unrewarding by mid-game, if not sooner. There's only so many missile and bomb expansions I can collect before I stop caring. A specific criticism for Dread is kinda tough to explain, but it's just so dark. Like, it's a platformer, so you jump on stuff, but the stuff you jump and walk on doesn't have any foreground detail. Instead, it's just blackness. You'd expect to see sci-fi wiring or metal flooring or scaffolding or something environmentally appropriate, but nope, just darkness. It's boring and bland and definitely not my favorite direction for the series in terms of art design. The Möbius Machine. A space explorer crash lands onto a planet full of dead and undead researchers and technology that manipulates time and space. I liked the Möbius Machine. I played it after it received all its updates, so I pretty much played the game at its peak, and I found it really enjoyable. I especially love its presentation. It's almost like claymation, but much more polished, and it's a twin-stick shooter, so I inherently sucked at it, but I was able to stumble my way through. I highly recommend taking your time with the game because its biomes are huge. If you like playing MVs to get lost in their world, there are very few MVs that give you as great of an opportunity to do so than the Möbius Machine. For unique elements, I'm going to go with some of the game's abilities. There's this ladder launcher move where you literally use rockets to propel yourself off ladders. It's super fun and leads to some interesting platforming. I also want to give the underwater jet move a shout out for being insanely cool and making underwater segments actually fun. For my criticisms, I personally found the game to be a little too big. Normally that wouldn't be an issue, but the game's environments aren't very diverse. It won't be long until you tire from seeing the same background skins and textures, and you'll even notice the same level layouts here and there. I also didn't find the exploration to be very rewarding. It's not bad, there's just a whole lot of upgrade fragments and very few direct upgrades. It gets disheartening when you finish a tricky section to get rewarded with part 1 of 3 of a gun you don't even like or use. Momodora, Reverie under the Moonlight. A priestess ventures into a cursed kingdom to stop its corruption. With a leaf. Sorry for the short synopsis, but Reverie is a pretty short game. But despite its brevity, it's made an impact on the genre by influencing games like Kingdom Shell and Flipwitch. And you like to see it because the Momodora franchise began life as a cave story clone. This series really found its footing with Reverie, though you can see it's swapped its source of inspiration to Souls-likes, especially Bloodborne. Tiny but mighty, Reverie is known for its amazing pixel work, outstanding atmosphere, and challenging difficulty, especially if you try for those no-hit boss fight rewards. When it comes to uniqueness, I'm not really sure Reverie brought anything new to the MV scene that we haven't seen before. Maybe the no-hit boss fight rewards? Now, don't get me wrong, Reverie isn't without its own charm. I think its most recognized feature is how it blends its gothic atmosphere with its cute pixel art aesthetic. The game's both adorable and spooky, and that kind of branding goes a long way. This is another MV where I personally don't have any criticisms. The game's not perfect, it's just that the criticism the game gets, I honestly don't feel are negatives. You'll hear the game doesn't innovate and that it's too short and that it has an uneven pacing. Those first 2 points aren't issues for me. As for the pacing, yeah, I can see that. The first half is extremely non-linear and a blast to replay, so I can see how I can approach things differently. And then the second half is pretty much a straight shot to the final boss with slight diversions if you want to grab optional stuff. Castlevania, Portrait of Ruin. Dracula's castle rises during World War II, and 2 heroes, what were their names? I think it was Jonathan, Charlotte, must enter to take down this new evil. Portrait's the second DS GIGASWORD, and it's pretty good. Of the DS trilogy, I'd say it's the second best. I am a sucker for MVs where you have a companion. I know that sounds oxymoronic, an MV with an atmosphere that's not isolating, especially for the era it released, but I was in love with this game because I could call out a partner to help me fight. And the fact that Jonathan and Charlotte would quibble and poke fun at each other was refreshing. Although GIGASWORDs have always had a tinge of humor and silliness to them, that unseriousness was mainly aimed at mechanics or goofy asides that might subvert player expectations, sometimes on a meta level. But not in Portrait. Portrait makes its characters and setting the clowns in this circus, and I love it. Which is ironic, because I hate the circus levels in this frickin' game. As far as the unique element Portrait brings, you have the character swapping mechanic, which wasn't common. Dragon's Trap did something similar with its transformations, and Ufouria the Saga also had you swapping characters. But Portrait did it in such a way that was seamless and came with all kinds of mechanics to make the multiple characters fun and practical, like having a character stay in place to help with puzzles, or how you can summon your character to fight alongside you with MP replacing their HP so you don't both share the same life pool and die. Each character came with their own equipment and movesets, making them feel like a whole other character. When it comes to criticism, I definitely have some. Portrait's a fine game, and I like it well enough, but I feel like this is where Giga started falling off. The game's RPG mechanics got a little bloated with the sub-weapon leveling gimmick where the more you use the sub-weapon, the stronger it gets. I've played through this game several times, and I never engage with this system. I'm also not a fan of the portraits you jump into. Exploring the castle is cool because that's always a cool thing to do, but these portraits were just weird. The idea of being able to jump inside of a painting is interesting because it opens up being able to go anywhere instead of being stuck in a castle setting. But their sequestered nature is kind of a bummer. And then the back half of the game reuses each of the 4 portraits, which kind of sucks, especially because that means we get 2 circus levels, and I just hate the circus levels so much. I don't know what it is, but they are just not fun to navigate. I try my best not to sound too much like a jerk when I rag on the game for basically copy-pasting the last half, because Giga and his team were cranking these games out almost year over year, and so I just figured this was a time-saving move. But regardless, it makes for a boring and forgettable last half for such a promising game.